Hi, folks. Thanks for joining today. We have a limited amount of time together, so we are going to get started and dive right in. You have joined the session. You say you want to be a leader. Let me start that again. You say you want to be a leader, but you can't seem to make up your mind. I love that title. If anyone hasn't picked up on the Prince reference, I did immediately. So that is our title for today. We are going to get started, and I would love for our panelists to introduce themselves by sharing their name, school, current role, and how long you've been in education. So anyone can go ahead and jump in and start.
I'll go ahead and start. My name is Alex Halliday, Director of Admissions and Enrollment Management here at the Northwest School in Seattle, Washington. I started working in independent schools in 2017 and jumped right into a director or senior leadership role, and it's been awesome. I love the journey. So I'm really excited to talk with you all today, and I'll pass it over to John.
Good morning, everyone. My name is John Yen. I'm the Director of Technology at Polytechnic School in Pasadena, California. I've been at Poly for 19 years, and it's been the entirety of my educational experience in independent school education. But prior to that, I was in nonprofit arts administration in New York City, and been in nonprofits for 30 years. And coming into, and so that's as long as I've been in education. So 19 years. Good to see everybody today. I'll pass it on to Zaira.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zaira Santiago, and I'm the Associate Head of School for Special Projects at Beaver Day School, which is in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts. And this is my 18th year in independent schools, but I've spent my entire career really in education, higher ed before independent schools. And I've served as Director of College Counseling, Director of Enrollment Management, and then assistant head and now associate head of school. So it's been great to learn about schools from all kinds of different angles. So I'll pass it on to Jaleesa.
Good morning, everyone. Well, good morning to those on the West Coast and good afternoon to those on the East Coast. My name is Jaleesa Anselm. I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at 10 Acre Country Day School in Wellesley, Massachusetts. It's about 20-ish minutes outside of Boston. And I believe for me, this is year 15 in education.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. We have a few set questions that I am going to ask. And if anybody in the audience has questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat and we will get to those towards the end of the presentation. Let me start off by asking you, what inspired you to pursue a leadership role with independent schools?
I'm happy to start. So for me, it was really thinking through the things that I thought didn't work in various schools that I've worked at and realizing if I wanted to change these things, that I would need to be part of a senior leadership team or at least have some sort of decision-making power. So that's what really got me interested in leadership. And from there, sort of talked with mentors and shadowed some folks and said, yeah, I can do this. I can definitely do this. Zaira was actually one of those people that helped me on my leadership journey.
Love that.
Way back when, Jaleesa, way back when. And I can follow up by saying for me, it was a combination of just wanting to make an impact and knowing that sometimes you need to be at the table to be able to make an impact. And so I could sit there and complain and whine and feel sad about all the things that I wanted to change, or I could be part of the solution. And so that small spark is what kind of pushed me in my journey.
I'll echo those sentiments. I think if you want to make change, you have to be a part of the change. And, I know myself and I have a lot of thoughts and opinions on things. And so if I want to be a part of that solution, being at the table was really important. I think in addition to that, being a leader for me is also about mentorship and getting an opportunity. I had a lot of great folks who reached back and were mentors to me. And made a huge difference in thinking about myself as a leader when I didn't think I was. And I really want to pay that forward. And I love being a supervisor. I love managing people. I love helping with other people's teams. It's one of the things that really brings me joy in my work.
I'd agree with all that. And I would say that, for me, my inspiration for being a leader was working for the institution I went to school. where I went to school. And so making that difference and having impact on future generations was a big inspiration for me for seeking leadership.
I love that you all mentioned that there were people that inspired you, or even just being back at, like you said, John, your alma mater made you want to be in that school. The next question: what skills or experiences do you believe are essential for educators considering leadership roles?
I can start with that one. I think really the ability to communicate, which often means listening way more than you speak, is absolutely essential, because that will help you in every aspect of your job. It'll help you to connect to people you're managing, earn their trust. It'll help you manage up. It'll help you, which is just part of being a leader at any level, really. And it'll help you with every aspect. And so it's something that I'm very grateful. I started out in admissions in the higher ed world. And so I feel like that was great training ground for communicating with small groups, big groups, and had a lot of practice with public speaking. And I think that definitely helped my career.
I would echo all of that, and I would also say being humble and having humility. I think one of the things that makes it really tricky to be a leader, particularly in independent schools, is when it feels like a sort of top-down approach. As Zaira was saying, there's no way to build trust that way with the people who work with you. I also, as an administrator, don't like saying the people who work below me, because no one is below. They work with me, and it's all about collaboration. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's such a huge part of being a leader. Like, yes, you have partial or full decision-making power, but no leader should be making decisions without checking in with the people they work with.
When I think about essential skills, I think communication is really key. I think in addition to that, I would add being okay with a decision that maybe you would not necessarily like fully back, but you have to come to decision, you have to come to a choice together. And in particular, in a leadership team, the work that your department does impacts another department and vice versa, but you don't always get agency in what that department has chosen to do. But you can choose how you react to it, and you can choose how to work with it or have influence on it to change it again. So I think that's really been something that I have worked on a lot, is like, okay, it's not the decision I would do, but you know what? I'm going to support it. I'm going to figure out how to work with it, and I'm going to figure out what we need to do as a team to make it work.
I would say there are two things that really resonate with me with this question and what you all have been saying, and it relates. For me, it's the empowerment of others around me, which is that it speaks to that collaborative aspects of in communication, the things that you guys have been talking about, which is really awesome. And also this ability to have a certain vision or holistic view, a broader view of things that are going on, to help others sort of see their place in it all, right? So part of leadership is having that vision, both in the macro and the micro, and just really fostering those relationships and empowering others to be their best selves.
Yeah, those are all awesome qualities. Jaleesa, something that resonated with me that you said was talking about not saying that somebody is below you. I remember in one of my first jobs, I was definitely below somebody. I reported up to somebody, and that person, when referring to me, they talked about me as being their colleague. And it just was something so different that I hadn't really thought about before, but just referring to me in that different way versus saying this person that works for me, or my assistant, or some other way of describing a colleague, like that was really impactful to me. So thank you for mentioning that. The next question we have on the list: what challenges did you face when stepping into a leadership role, and how did you overcome them?
I'll start. So my role is actually new to my school when I arrived 19 years ago. So there was a huge challenge in establishing integrity and also establishing relationships for people that worked with me, the faculty and the staff, and seeing what my role was and what my responsibilities would be and what my leadership would be like in the institution. So a lot of it was just early on defining who I was and my relationship with people.
I think I agree. And I also think that sometimes we are our own worst enemy in that sense, right? Like our own self-doubt and um, that sense that of, do I really belong here? Do I really have what it takes? Or, oh my gosh, I actually don't know anything. What am I going to do if I'm in a situation that I don't know how to handle? And so I think for me, gaining that self-confidence was took a lot of work and took a lot of like other people have mentioned, there's mentors and people who've really helped me with that, but it took some work, um, just myself to just be able to stand up and have some confidence.
And I would definitely echo that. I had a former employer who told me I wasn't marketable and that the positions I was aspiring to, I would never be able to land. So it was definitely the self-confidence piece and working with mentors who breathed life into me and said, of course you can do this. And honestly, you're already the work that you want to do, you're already doing a lot of it without that title. And I think for me, another really big barrier was my age. So I'm the youngest person on our senior admin team by at least 10 years, if not more. And sometimes it can be hard to get your voice heard when people feel like they may have seniority or, they've worked at the school for much longer or what have you. And one of the things that's really helped me overcome that is, again, the self-confidence piece and really believing that I'm actually really good at my job and having people on our senior leadership team who also affirm that for you. So my assistant head of school, I think this is year 37 for her at our school. So she's clearly the most seasoned person on our administrative team. And the number of times that we collaborate is incredible. So just making sure that, yes, you have that self-confidence piece. Yes, you've got people behind you who are rooting for you and cheering for you. And then also really knowing that you're there because you deserve to be there.
Julie said that all resonates, especially the age piece. I was 24 when I started on a senior leadership team, and there's so much self-doubt and questioning that goes into that at that point in your career where you're asking, am I supposed to be here? And someone saw something in me at that point and really believed in me and supported and mentored me, and I had to believe in that too. So I do definitely recommend that you have to find that self-confidence and the agency that you know what you're doing in your role, and you were asked to do that for a reason. I think with that too comes when you step into a leadership role, you are inheriting all of the decisions that came before you. And even if you would have made that decision differently, it is now in your lap. And you have to think about how you're going to handle it now and what are you going to leave for the next person. And I think that's a really hard question that we don't talk about enough, is, ideally you think about staying at a school you find and you love and you're going to be there forever. But you never know, and you never know when the next thing is calling. And I think our duty to our schools as good leaders is to leave our schools in great places. And I think about the places I've come into, what was left for me and what was helpful and what was not left for me and what I might have wanted to be left. And so I really think about, we're inheriting decisions and we're leaving decisions for people too.
Love that way of thinking about it. What are we leaving for the next person? I think it's something that is so forgotten about. You're in your day-to-day and trying to figure out what your job is and how you're going to do your best, but leaving something for the next person is awesome. Okay. What advice would you give to educators unsure about stepping into leadership or hesitant about the challenges that come with it?
I got some advice from a current head of school, gosh, maybe 10 years ago now, that said, for the job you want, start looking at job descriptions. Start mapping out which of the things on those job descriptions you're already doing. And most likely, you'll realize that at least more than half of the things that are required of this position are things you're already doing in your day-to-day. I'd also say if you don't have a personal board of directors for yourself in your career, you definitely want to do that. And those people will absolutely help you to find opportunities to shadow other leaders. Definitely network as much as you can. And I think particularly if you're interested in leadership, but aren't necessarily sure what type of leadership role you're most interested in, making sure that you're looking at a variety of positions.
The personal board of directors, I think, is a great piece of advice, like having some folks who you can turn to and just pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm thinking through this. Can you just tell me, what you think about it? Independent schools, we do not need to reinvent the wheel all the time. Phone a friend, and having that mentorship and those connections makes a huge difference. So I'll give a thumbs up to that, Jaleesa, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I think just remembering two things. One, that there is no perfect time to make that jump, right? Like you're never going to feel like you have it 100% under your belt, right? Half of the experience that you gain through actually doing the work. And so you just have to feel like you have the willingness to try and fail and get up again and try it. And along with that, and this is kind of echoing what Jaleesa and Alex said, you can learn that experience in other ways, right? Just because you're not the director of admissions doesn't mean that you can't learn what enrollment management looks like, right? If you think you might want to do, might want to be a division director one day, you should, be joining committees. And whenever there's a volunteer opportunity at your school where you can learn something new, raise your hand, because you sometimes have to build that runway for yourself before you can take off. And you have it in you to do it. You just have to take advantage of all the opportunities.
Well, I think you guys said everything I was going to mention, which is really fun. I was going to say like the stepping up piece, standing up, stepping up, leaning in to your school and your community is really huge in giving you the experience and breadth of experience of knowing how schools work. And as far as the mentor and board piece, I can't reiterate that enough. The networking really adds to that and meeting people. Get yourself involved in your local accreditations that are happening in your state or your area. It's a great opportunity for professional development and learning about how schools and leadership works in independent schools. And then I had a mentor of mine who's a former federal trade commissioner in the United States. He said to me once, he says, John, don't pull your punches. And it was one of those things, and he's a very successful person. And he said to me, I see you, your vision is too low, number one. Number two, shoot higher, look higher. And whatever he meant by higher, which is basically expand your vision of what's possible. And have the courage and don't pull your punches, like go for it.
Yes. We have a couple questions in the chat, so I am going to go to the chat. An anonymous attendee asks or states, I'd love to hear about moments of tension as a leader when you've had to navigate being leaders of the global majority in white supremacy culture, particularly regarding what leader looks like and acts like in white supremacy culture versus who and what you are. Are you able to see these questions as well, panelists? Okay. Okay.
That's John, go ahead, please.
Okay. No, I was just going to say, like, coming back to my school and being in a new position and being an Asian male in a technology position, there was a ton of stereotypes that were sort of laid on top of me, both from the history of being a student, but also this idea of the Asian male scientist sort of stereotype. And so I was sort of put in that box. What people don't know is that when I graduated from Poly, I graduated as an artist and I went to art school. So that was my sort of early vocation. So it's there's could be more polar opposite in a way. And so people kept looking at me in a certain box that I could not break out of, right? For a number of years, from board members to parents to colleagues. It was, they had in their mind who I was based upon my job title and my race and my gender. Like, this is who he is. He's the dorky Asian technology guy, right? But that's not who I am, right? And so people have to get to know me and build those relationships and be open to that. And that was really hard to sort of break through at first, right? Because there was a codification that I had to kind of disassemble as years went on.
Does anyone else want to jump in on that one? We have other
Sure.
questions.
I'll just say, so one of the things that I learned at a leadership institute that I attended a number of years ago, I know this sort of answers another question that's in the chat, but I'll just say it since it's top of mind for me right now. definitely attend Leadership Institutes if you can. The wealth of knowledge you gain just from connecting with different folks is invaluable. But in one of those Leadership Institutes I attended, one of the things that the faculty shared was in a given school year, you have a finite number of fire alarms you can pull. So when you're really thinking about being a leader and being in management, really think through the decisions that your team is making. Think about what your non-negotiables are and the things that are the proverbial hill you'll die on are. So when you have those moments, stand firm in those moments. And when you have the other moments where, like Alex was saying earlier, you sort of have to support your team, even if you're not fully on board with something, find ways to sort of still insert your voice so that you can live with this decision that's being made, even if it wasn't necessarily the way that you would have gone. But again, if it is something that you are feeling very passionate about and need to share your voice, do it.
Yeah, and I think this kind of straddles both questions, I think, that are being asked. I think the reality is that most independent schools are primarily white institutions. And there is a certain level of resiliency that, when I said before, you kind of got to build your runway before you can take off. That's part of building that runway. You have to figure out what fills you and what depletes you, right? And it might be that the part that fills you isn't 100% of the time in your school. And so find those places, whether it's going to POCC, whether it's going to a leadership conference, which is whether it's making sure you take all of your time off to spend with the people you love, whatever it is, find what fills you and just be aware that it might not be at the institution, so that when you are there, you can pick the fights that you want to fight. You need strength, and you need to sort of be full in order to do that. And so I think you have to decide for yourself whether the place that you are, you have enough things to fill you to be able to use that up in that place.
Yeah, there are actually a couple questions in the chat related to mentorship. So, and board of directors. So somebody asked, how do you ask somebody to mentor you? Are there certain programs that you can find, gain a mentor? John, I know you touched on that. Also related to that, what did setting that up look like for each of you?
I have found mentors in the wildest of places. You just never know. And but I think some of the programs that I participated in, there are regional programs through your regional associations a lot of the times, or even things like the Aspiring Heads program. I did the Pathways program through NWAIS, Northwest Association, and that's for women who are thinking about leadership. And that was really powerful to be in a space with 20 women over 2 years, to really build a cohort and a group of folks who could just ask those questions about what is it like to be a woman in leadership? What is the husband's role if you want to be a head of school, if you have a husband or a spouse? And it's just such an interesting place to have those conversations. So look for those regional programs. And I also say just reach out to folks. You will be surprised how many folks just like to talk about themselves and like want to pass this on and help someone go forward. I think trying to find time and being respectful of their time, I think, is important. So coming prepared with a couple of questions that you have, but I don't think you have to put a lot of pressure on it to be a formal piece of this. But I do think it is important to ask them, like, would you be a part of my personal board of directors, so that they know that when you call, that you're going to be calling because you have a question about, you know, I'm on a board of trustees, I'm a board chair. I know nothing about, you know, building a new building. And I needed to make a phone call to someone who works in architecture and have them really break down for me and help me understand what questions I needed to be asking. And so having that person who I never thought was going to be the person I would call for that, and just being able to take them out to coffee makes a huge difference. And then it was because I'd already laid that groundwork.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds simple, but ask. I mean, I present, you know, a few times a year, and at the end of every session, I always say, especially if it's something geared towards educators of color, I always give my contact info, and I always say, reach out. And maybe I get one person reaching out a year out of all of the presentations that I do. So sometimes really when people say reach out, they mean it. I mean, I'm I wouldn't put my email address out there if I didn't mean it. And so I think just reaching out to people and connecting and having a network, because you never know when someone will be useful. Kind of Alex's point, like you never know when their area of expertise is going to be handy to you. And I would say the flip side of that is pay it forward. Be the person that offers to be there for others who are kind of, farther behind the journey. Be the person who's offering to, get a phone call when somebody needs it.
It's actually a perfect segue, and I know we're running short on time, so I just put my school name as part of my ID badge. Feel free to email me. I agree completely with Zara and Alex. When people say reach out, they really do mean it.
And I'll just say all of those things. And when you extend yourself to a conference, there's a great opportunity, especially POCC and other professional conferences, to meet people. And I always encourage my colleagues who are especially nervous about stepping into leadership roles is submit a presentation in a conference. It really gets you out there. And for me, it wasn't so much asking somebody to be on my board. It became more natural over time, where you build those relationships, and somebody, like you guys said, will say, let me know if you need anything, right? And you start to build that relationship with those people. And when you call, they answer, and that's, and the reciprocity is also really important. So I've served on mentor programs for our Technology Leaders Association, and that's a really important thing too, and that builds that network as well. So +1 on everything, and just really focus on the relationships.
Yeah, that's awesome. Jaleesa, thank you for mentioning contact information, because I'm sure everyone on this panel would be happy to have people reach out to them with questions. And so if you want to reach out to these folks, their information is, John put his info in the chat, and you can also find it online in the virtual careers website. Their name and school is listed for sure, and I'm sure email addresses are someplace. But if you are having trouble reaching out to anybody, feel free to contact either Ara or myself at StrataGenius, and we're happy to put you in touch with folks. Let's go with one other question and see how far we get. So let's go with, what advice would you give to those looking to transition from higher education to independent school sector through management roles rather than teaching?
This was my transition, and I think I heard Zara, you say, I think we both did college admissions. When I came from college admissions, it was a natural fit to jump right into admissions. The school actually had a position for college counseling and admissions open, and so it was kind of a strange situation where they were interviewing me for whichever was the right fit. But I think if you're thinking about that jump, I think really starting to think about more student-facing work, or how you want to get more involved with that age of students, can be really helpful, as well as putting yourself in situations to learn more about independent schools, which I think have a lot of similarities in their structures to universities, but the size scale is so different that I do think trying to get more education and opportunities to just connect and mentor yourself and build the skills up that schools are going to be looking for. So exposure to understanding the business model of schools, depending on what role you're looking for. But I don't know, Zaira.
Yeah, no, that's that was my path as well. And I think the most common pathways are admissions and college counseling, because there's such a big overlap. But and I think that there are you have to also find the right independent school if that's not where you're coming from, because I do think that there are independent schools that are more willing to look at like what experience and what skill sets you bring in a managerial role, whether it's, there's marketing, there are other aspects of the school, business office, there are other aspects of the school that your skill set might fit right in. But I agree, you have to know the school, you have to know schools. And so find ways to volunteer, connect, and mentor people in the independent school world, so that that you can get connections. And when a job comes up, they think of you.
Yes, and we are at time. So thank you folks so much for being on this panel and answering these questions. I think that folks are able to go back to the exhibition hall, but it looks like everything is still open. So I say we keep going if that's okay. And if our panelists have to leave, please feel free. But there is one more question in the chat that we can get to if we have the time. How do you work with difficult employees and difficult supervisors to effectively get the work done?
For me, it's always about context and having an empathy towards how people are coming to you. And it's not so much always where you're coming to the situation, although it's both sides. I often find that in the moments where I don't do well in those situations, I'm thinking on the one-sided part of that, and I'm not opening my mind up to the greater context of how that person's coming to me in that situation, or how they're coming to a situation in general. Where are they at in their lives? What's going on in their day? And so that having an awareness and empathy towards that requires, just time with people and having a connectedness to your community and your people that you serve. And that's really important.
I would add just a couple quick things. One, build currency with people. Sometimes when you need to have hard conversations, if you're coming from it, like kind of like a cold call, like you don't know the people, you haven't invested time in getting to know them during normal times, it can make it harder for them to trust you, right? And to feel like you have their best interest in mind. So spend some time building that currency, putting currency in the bank, which might mean making actual deliberate time to just talk to people, not just about the work, and socialize, etc. And two is you have to practice. I know that sounds really strange, but difficult conversations are always difficult. And so you only get better at feeling less discomfort with it. And so practice with someone that you trust, script it out, and just try to play role a couple of difficult situations before you actually have to employ that. I think those are the three things that have kind of helped me along the way.
Doing a role play, it sounds so silly, but it can make the biggest difference in just being prepared for a tough conversation and like kind of having those in your back pockets of here's the things I need to get out. I think in that same vein, too often, and depending on the region you're in and the culture, people don't always say things, right? That you can feel some type of way. And I have to stop and ask myself, have I said this to this person? Like before I start feeling frustration, have I actually said that when they are 5 minutes late to this thing, it drives me nuts? Right? Like, and then having the courage once you've identified the issue to actually have a conversation and say, hey, I know you probably don't mean to be 5 minutes late, but this is the impact it's having on me. And I'd really appreciate if we could find a way to make that work. And then I think it lines you up for that second conversation if they continue to be 5, right? And I think this is where we have to be accountable and hold each other accountable, and being accountable is kind, and holding each other to that is kind, because otherwise we get that frustration built up.
I'd echo everything my fellow panelists shared. And I'd also say to, in terms of building that capital, partner with people who have already put in that work. So for me, I said this before, partnered a lot with my assistant head of school because she has been at the school for so long and is definitely the most trusted person on really within our school community. So in really shadowing her my first year and working in collaboration with her, it helped me to be able to build capital with our faculty and staff, because they felt like, well, if our assistant head vouches for me, then okay, I'm sort of okay. And once I sort of had that inroads, taking the time to build my own capacity and relationship with folks has really helped having those difficult conversations.
Yes, I'm sure everyone wishes we had so much more time with you all. We've had some great questions and your answers have been awesome. So we are ending the presentation officially. Thank you everyone for joining. Please reach out to our panelists if you have other questions. I know that they are open to it. So thank you so much.